What's good? It's Fevir. Today we're going to talk about Hob. This is a quirky little game you may not have heard about, brought to us by Runic Games, the guys behind probably my favorite action RPG, Torchlight, and it was just an unexpected pleasure to play. I want to state right away that if my opinion means something to you, if it helps inform your buys, I 100% recommend this game to anyone who enjoys single-player games, and with that in mind, I would urge you to watch, read, or learn as little as possible before actually playing the game, this video included. And because of this, the footage used in this video, if you do watch it, is from about the first 20-ish minutes or from release trailers. I'm trying very hard not to spoil anything, so also keep in mind that this isn't going to be representative of the game as a whole. And it's because Hob had me feeling this type of way, where I was kind of at odds within myself, someone who makes YouTube videos, with a part of me that wants to promote or share or talk about all the really cool stuff that happens and get you excited to buy the game, but also not wanting to ruin any of it for you. It was a very tough line to walk. So what exactly is Hob? I guess you could categorize it as almost a 3D puzzle platformer adventure game, but I don't think that does it justice. Gameplay-wise, just watching the footage with the running and the jumping and the swinging of the sword and the cutting the grass, it very much looks as it plays. Nothing overly complicated, very simple overall, but Hob is more than its gameplay. Although I imagine we'll see a lot of comparisons to the older Zelda A Link to the Past game, because at first glance, this may even look like a game, one of those modern Zelda games that iterates on that basic gameplay. The movement, the combat, bringing it into a 3D space, adding verticality and some more fluid actions and animations, and sure, I get that, but I think what these games both share, and the reason why it's the go-to pick to compare it to something, is that they're both more than the sum of their parts, and it really boils down to that word adventure, where the act of playing the game and moving through it just somehow feels grander than its features. It's what I think makes Zelda games as a whole so popular, and it's very hard to describe, but I actually think what Hob and Zelda actually have in common, what they share, is less about the gameplay, and more the same thing that a game like Okami or Journey share with Zelda, and so they share with Hob as well, which again is a very hard thing to put a finger on. Unlike Journey and more like Zelda, Hob is a little less structured while still being linear. It gives more an illusion of freedom or like a wider path to travel down, but you generally don't have this pressing indicator of what needs to be done. In fact, unlike even Zelda, discovering what you're doing, how, and why is part of that adventure, which also happens to take place in a game without dialogue or text. Because of this, much of the game is concerned with tone and atmosphere to convey what's happening or how you should feel or something. So whether it's a specific camera angle or a change in the music, even like the color of certain things, all is done in a deliberate means to use gameplay and environment to tell the story that they aren't, and it works. And what I thought was pretty cool is if you ask people after they've beaten the game, which roughly takes about 6 to 8 hours, when and how did you figure out X and Y and why you were doing Z, you get much different answers, as there are contextual clues everywhere and most people will pick up on different things. There are really 3 things that stuck out to me when I was playing Hob that I want to mention here, and the first is level design. It is absolutely stellar. I found myself many times just saying under my breath while playing, like, fuck me, that's so cool. The world of Hob is actually quite large for a game that only spans 6 to 8 hours, but it's also incredibly dense, both in optional secret areas to explore and uncover, but also in the platform and platformings and puzzles used to just move throughout the game. And this is because of such a great use of this theme in Hob of this mechanical gear work almost underpinning. So a lot of the areas and the world itself is designed to be moving parts, and they're actually repurposed in a way. When a large portion of your screen is rotated 90 degrees and connects with what's around it to form new pathways and new puzzles, when a giant landmass that you've been able to see in the distance is raised up or lowered or pulled closer, or bits and pieces of machinery are manipulated and moved, which I should add, sometimes are just flat out cinematically cool moments, and this is mixed in with an almost Metroidvania style of exploration exploration where certain areas become available when certain abilities or criteria are met, and a lot of time the landscapes themselves have changed in tandem, and it's crazy to revisit the same but different areas. And the way they deal with verticality isn't just adding layers, it really is about adding just this massive sense of scope, which has also helped with the lack of loading screens. They also just do a great job with exploration and secrets in general, where so much stuff is hidden in plain sight right next to you and you just don't know it. The face palms I had as I backtracked and saw how much I missed were great. The second is that while the game focuses more on puzzles and exploration than combat, the game doesn't focus on complexity or difficulty. A lot of games now try to impress you or beat you and allow you to exercise mastery of the system, and that satisfaction from mastery of the system is the appeal or the sense of satisfaction, or they give you puzzles that just require a shit ton out of you and have you running for Google. And there is definitely a place for that, but that place is not here in Hob. Hob takes me way back to where everything was just kind of fair. Everything felt doable. Even if you got stuck, you didn't feel like you were bested. It's not, get good kid. It's just you feel like you might have missed something. It's not inherently difficult to remember to backtrack to an area where you saw a stone that you can now pick up, or dash into a tree, or hook shot to a post, or even to find Waldo. But there is something satisfying to be said for figuring out what to do next without a real difficulty attached to it. And something Hob does well is push you into areas and puzzles where you think, aren't I so clever that I just figured this out? I bet this is a really big secret. But no, it's just the path you were meant to take, and it's because that simple interaction of charging against a tree has been prettied up and feels more than it is in Hob, and Hob does a really great job of guiding you without you even realizing it. And it's going to sound so small and specific, but I had this wave of goodwill wash over me on this ladder. I'm not going to explain much of the context surrounding the world or the level around this ladder, but the fact that this ladder is double the width of every other ladder that I saw in the game summed it up for me. Runic Games is actively trying to prevent frustration. They're actively not designing for some sort of skill check. Having the ladder smaller wouldn't really add anything, and this is just seen throughout the game. The platforming, it's okay, the controls are okay, but you don't need pixel perfect jumps, so it doesn't need to be better than okay. You rarely have to wonder, can I make that jump? The emphasis in everything is just choosing, should I jump over there? What's over there? What am I going to do when I get there? It's very subtle, but it feels fair throughout the entire game. And lastly, there's a respect for the player and their time. So I tend to think that the 6 to 8 hour mark is nearly perfect for single player games. The young me would scoff at that, as game length used to be one of my priorities, but with shrinking time, I want a good time to quality ratio. But more than that, I want the experience to have closure, I want it to end, but more so than the length, the pacing in Hob is great. A lot of games start really quick, move you through a tutorial, they teach you, then they kind of pace at a constant linear rate, and that can cause a bit of a fizzle, a bit of a lull, especially with me. Very few games do I manage to stick with until the end. Hob maintained my interest. It does some fun stuff with pacing, as well as separating vital and optional content that, again, contextual clues let you in on. But more than that, and this is something that actively prevented me from enjoying a lot of platforming games in the past, even Metroidvania style games, I hate backtracking and replaying bits, especially the more tedious puzzles. Hob is incredibly generous with quick access and checkpoints. I've died quite a bit in my exploration during the game, and you never feel bad at how far back you get sent back to a checkpoint that you didn't even need to pay attention to or interact with to activate. And the way most of the platforming and puzzles and backtracking happen is, say that you're at an area where there seems to be like this jumping puzzle, and you go through it and it's, jump here, roll here, running jump here, and you take on that puzzle or that platforming or even like that combat, or you reach an area from a different, more tedious way to get there. There is almost always going to be a ladder or something that you will be able to unlock that will allow you to bypass ever having to do that puzzle again and allow you to traverse the world much quicker and more conveniently. And you never realistically need to double up and do the same bit again. The ladder skips it. Hell, throughout the game, they could probably pad another hour or two if they got rid of these, but they don't. And I guess I'll go ahead and add one more minor thing that I really liked here. This is kind of personal, the HUD. It's hidden unless needed, and it's pretty minimal even when it is active. I have a weird obsession with UI and HUD, so I really appreciated appreciated this touch, but it really does help the game capture you. Like, when I'm talking about Hob, it's so weird. I have so many intangible reasons why this game is good, and I'm trying to actively not mention things that I want you to figure out on your own, but it's just that Hob is all about the intangible charm that intricate and deliberate design can achieve. That all said, and I don't want to dwell in the negatives, but I will mention the things that may remove the game from your consideration. As I said earlier, the game is only about 6 to 8 hours long, it costs around $20, it's available for the PS4 and PC, and has controller support for PC, and I would not play it if you do not have a controller. The keyboard and mouse controls just don't feel good. It has a bit of the Bethesda problem where there are bugs. I had 2 bugs throughout my entire playthrough, and most people will as well, but they're just not the same bugs, and generally this is due to a ongoing issue with collision detection or clipping, so it's not going to be a 100% bug-free experience. Luckily, as I said before, there is a generous checkpoint system and an option to respawn if you get stuck. Combat is found in the game, but it is quite rare. It's very an understated feature of the game. The game is a puzzle game first. The thing about Hob, to say at the end here, is it is one of my favorite games of the year, but due to its size and the scope and its genre, it exists for me as being in a tier below what I would generally have in the running for my game of the year or personal top lists. In this way, it shares company with other great games like Bastion, or Dust, or Darkest Dungeon, or Two Brothers, or Ori, which is great company to have to even just be mentioned with all of those great titles. I think so highly of this game that while I'm not going to say it's going to be my game of the year or it's not going to be my top list, I would not be surprised if it ends up in other people's game of the year recommendations. I think it brings back a type of charm I haven't felt in a long time, and there's just a lot of nods and homages paid to just like games of the past, and I bet it just all started out with Runic Games having the premise of, let's tell a story with no words. I cannot recommend Hob enough. Until next time, this is Fevir. Purse.